Welcome to the Lady Up America podcast. I'm Diane Canada, your host. I'm so glad you're here. Thanks for tuning in. You know, this world is sinking sand. Now, I say that not to scare us, not to have a doom and gloom attitude, not at all. But we have to cling to the rock. We have to cling to what's real. And I'll tell you, you're never so grateful for something stable as when you start feeling that ground shifting under you, whether that's metaphorically or literally. We look at natural disasters, mudslides, earthquakes, things like that. We want things to be solid. We want things to be stable in our own emotions and in our own mental attitudes, things like that. It's very difficult when we start to feel like we're floating, like we don't have an anchor. We don't have, we can't see the shoreline anymore. It's a very scary feeling in that. And we're wired for that because we're wired for stability. We're wired for the ability to feel grounded and anchored. God put that in us as an instinct. So as we see the country drifting, as we see the country kind of crumbling in places, we see all kinds of institutions that we thought were so stable crumbling. It's unnerving, right? And we need to get back to that stability. But when we have so many people in our culture that are trying to convince us that right is wrong and wrong is right based on how you feel about it, based on how you identify, based on your opinion about it, that's there's nothing stable in that. Like I want, and I know you do too, we need to know that things are solid. We need a rock to cling to when things get crazy, when things get very unstable. And God is the rock. He's the only one that is the truth. He says in the Bible, I'm the same yesterday, today, and tomorrow. He says, on this rock, I will build my church. He is a God of stability. He's a God of foundation. And that's very important to him. Cornerstones, things like that. So how do we handle it in a world that is telling us that we shouldn't believe our eyes, that whatever your truth is and your truth is and your truth is acceptable? No, we need the truth. And that's what we're going to be talking about today. So today's show is entitled Sinking Sand versus Solid Rock. And before we bring Steve Gill on to go over our news headlines and start to try to get our balance with those, I just want to remind you, if you will, please like and subscribe right here. Helps other people to find the podcast. And it also gives you a little bell notification to let you know when the next episode drops so that you don't miss one. And I'm really grateful to see these numbers increasing. I'm very grateful to see you listening and leaning in. So thank you so much. Also, I want to remind you that if there is something that you want me to talk about, if there's a special request that you have about a news topic or something, feel free to send it. Send it in the comments, or you can go on my website, dianecanada.com, and email me. Let me know what's on your heart and your mind, because we're in this together. And maybe there's something that you might suggest that we could all benefit from. So I encourage you to do that too. All right, I'll be right back with Steve Gill.
Taking back this house, taking back this town. Mama, don't back down. Just lay it up, lay it up, lay it up.
All right, ladies, welcome back. We are going to visit now for a few minutes with our good friend, Steve Gill. He is the founding editor and publisher at TriStar Daily. You can find him at tristardaily.com. But Steve is a wealth of information, wealth of wisdom when it comes to all these crazy headlines that we see. He has served in the White House. He's been on radio for many years. He does international television. He's somebody we can trust to give it to us straight. So y'all please welcome to the show my friend Steve Gill. Hey, Steve.
Thank you. Good to be back. And my favorite story of the week comes not from Tennessee that we'll start off with, but Munich, Germany. And it's not a throwback to Oktoberfest. Marco Rubio went over and spoke to the European leaders in straight, direct terms. Now, keep in mind that a year ago at the same summit, J.D. Vance went over and spoke, and they were just apoplectic because he was harsh, he was tough, he was very Trumpish, and they were appalled at the language and the treatment they felt like they got from Vice President J.D. Vance. That year, it was kind of like getting called to the principal's office to be admonished. Now, I know you never had that experience.
Never.
I spent way too much time in the principal's office. And then this year, you had Marco Rubio go over and speak. And Rubio was a different tone, a different tenor, and his was much more like an interdiction, like you have a drunk uncle or a nephew on drugs. And he was basically advising the European leadership, the leaders of Germany and France and England and the rest. You guys are screwed up, and you got to fix your culture. You got to
Yeah.
fix your economies. We will be your friend. We will assist, but we're not going to carry you. And
Yes.
you need to make some serious changes. And it was tough talk. It was straight talk. And now the question is, will they listen? Will they respond? So I think Marco Rubio just, again, moved himself even higher in the status as, perhaps the best, Secretary of State of all time in the U.S. And certainly, I think he and J.D. Vance are by far the front runners for the next president of the United States. Not sure who'll be top or bottom of that ticket if those are the two. And meanwhile, you had AOC go over to Munich to try and show her intellectual and foreign policy heft. And at one point, she's taking on Marco, claiming, well, he made some comment about cowboys in the U.S. are the result of Spain. It's like, well, yeah, the Spanish brought horses and cows to what is now the U.S. and the West, and you wouldn't have cowboys without horses and cows. So again, her intellectual heft or lack thereof was on display. This is a woman who the Democrats are touting as one of their leading prospects to be the next president of the United
God
States.
help us.
And if she has her intellectual bank account is overdrawn in about every way, and she was on display for the world to see this week. And between Marco Rubio and how well he did, and AOC showing her absolute inane lack of being able to communicate, the word salad she was dropping on relatively easy questions. Yeah, we got a good view of what may be next. And I was doing a show for a European TV station earlier today, and I pointed out as they asked, well, don't you think that the next president will be better for Europe than President Trump? I said, look, you had J.D. Vance a year ago in Munich. You had Marco Rubio this time. Those that are thinking we only have to hang on for 3 more years of Trump need to be looking forward and thinking, man, it may be worse for us if we get J.D. Vance or Marco Rubio next.
Yeah, I think Rubio is laying the foundation for what to expect if he does. I love J.D. Vance, I do, but I think Marco has just really proven himself. I think people are rallying behind him. And I don't think in any alternate universe that there's going to be any fear in Putin's eyes over an AOC presidency. I mean, God help us. I never want to speak bad of anybody. Like, God bless her heart, but she just needs to go back to bartending and leave the grown-up table. Just get up and walk away from that table, because she just does not belong there. And she proves it over and over and over again every time she opens her mouth.
I've never seen any score sheets of what kind of bartender she was. So I'm not sure that sending her back into the bartending ranks, do we know, was she even capable or competent of even doing that?
Who knows?
I would hesitate to put her in any job based upon the.
And it's hard. Bartending is hard. That's hard work. It is hard work. Yeah.
Her best thing has been, her husband has been able to get rich thanks to apparently insider trading and fake businesses. You look at these members of Congress, Ilhan Omar, AOC, a whole host of others, they're winning the lottery ticket when they get elected. And yet there's no prosecution. There's no accountability for what they're doing on our dime. And it's more than dimes. It's millions of dollars that they're putting into their own pockets.
I know. It's infuriating. It's infuriating for so many people. I'm glad that we're getting a really good microscopic look at it, but I don't know if it's sometimes ignorance is bliss in situations like this, although we all suspected it. But now that it's all out there, and that's why even with the Epstein files and all that's coming out, just exposing, flipping on the light and exposing all the roaches. But what's so hard for people is they know nobody's going to get prosecuted. Nobody's going to be held accountable. And it's just, like I said, it's just infuriating for those onlookers like us.
I think the other big story nationally, and then we'll talk a little Tennessee for a moment, is that the government shutdown is back. Yeah. The Democrats have shut down the federal government because they refuse to allow a bill to pass that would allow the requirement of showing a photo ID when you vote.
Yeah.
Haiti and Somalia require photo IDs to vote. So we are a third world country when it comes to election integrity because Hakeem Jeffries and the left, are putting Americans at risk. I mean, TSA workers are again working for free because you have the Democrats shutting down our security, shutting down our government because they're once again pitching a tantrum. And yet are people feeling, except for those employees who are working for free, most Americans are not suffering from this. And keep in mind that Hakeem Jeffries is the one who constantly goes out there claiming that inflation is increasing. Well, that's a lie. That interest rates are going up. That's a lie. That the stock market is plummeting. It's reached record highs.
Yeah.
All the things the Democrats are saying about the economy are a lie and intended to fool the public into thinking things are worse than they are as we head toward the midterms. And I know you're going to talk later today a little bit about the difference in objective and subjective truth.
Yeah.
Look, 2 + 2 is 4. Math is math. Whether I like the result or not, math is math. And Democrats are horrible at mathing. That's what you're seeing when they continue to try and downgrade the economy, when they can't allow for balanced budgets or even the progress that we could sustain if we would deal with the fraud, the waste, the abuse that we're seeing with Somali daycare centers and everything else. Math is not a good subject for Democrats.
No.
And unfortunately, they use the subjective approach rather than the objective approach to try and make their pitch to the American people. And our objective as conservatives and Republicans and Christians is to try to tell the truth louder than they lie.
Yeah. Yeah. And we have to speak it. We have to say it out of our mouths. Like the days of riding the fence and just sitting back and hoping it'll all work itself out are over. I mean, this is the lady up. Somebody asked me, I was on a podcast the other day, Steve, and somebody said, what do you mean about lady up? And I'm like, speak up, grow up in your faith, be on the front lines and come out here and be a warrior for the truth, for God. Because if we don't start talking, they're the only ones doing the talking, and we have got to get off our blessed assurance, and start speaking it out of our mouths. That's the way we push this evil back, is by the word of God. Not to get on my soapbox, but it's just the only way to push this evil back. And that's what it is. God said in those last days that people would call evil good and good evil. And the only restraint for that is the church. So yeah, I'm going to be on a rant about this today, just forewarning for all the listeners that yes, you're so right. Like, don't believe your eyes, just believe what we say. No, people, we have discernment. We have wisdom. We need to just start tapping into it and using it. It's so frustrating. Like the church is asleep, Steve.
Well, and I love your use of the term lady up. I mean, we've been told for so long, man up, get tough, stand up and speak up. Put on your big boy jockey shorts, put on your big girl panties.
Yep.
It's time to man up and woman up. And I think, again, if we're going to save our nation for the next generation, for future generations, it's up to this generation to man up and lady up and stand up and speak up, all those ups. Yep. And if we do that, then we're going to leave things better than we inherited them and leave it better for our kids and grandkids.
Yeah. Yeah. Think about, I mean, I don't want to get deep on this right now, but think about if people would have spoken up and stood up, around 1942, 43, I mean, it's always a spiritual battle, and it's always the enemy, some form, incarnation of the enemy trying to silence us. And it is our voice. It's that voice that pushes the evil back, and that courage. It's like, okay, you're scared. I get it. We're scared. It's hard to stand up. Might cost you something. It's supposed to cost you something. It's supposed to, mamby pamby. I mean, people think that this podcast is like all about love and kumbaya. No, it's a very tough love show. I might have on my pearls, but I'm tough love. All right.
And again, we know, as you mentioned, silencing the voices of the right, of Christians, of conservatives, that comes from the evil side. Unfortunately, we silence our own voices when we don't vote, when we don't speak up. 17 million Christian evangelicals sit home every election year rather than move from the pews to the polls. And that 17 million is the margin of difference in congressional races, state house, state senate races, and in presidential races where 20,000 votes separates President Trump from winning or losing Georgia in 2020. The difference in Arizona. It's not 17 million. In many cases, it's 20, 30, 50,000 Christians who stayed home, who silenced their own voices, on things like protecting unborn life, on making sure conservatives are appointed to the Supreme Court, protecting religious liberty. When we don't vote, we silence our own voices. So we can point the finger at Satan. We can point the finger at the Democrats who try to silence and overspeak us. But when we stay home, we silence our own voices. We gag ourselves.
Amen.
And this midterm election this year, we have to move beyond that and move from the pews to the polls. And we need preachers in the pulpits to encourage that. They get so scared. Oh, somebody's going to challenge my tax status.
Yeah.
You aren't really allowed, although you can do it in black churches, to say vote for this particular candidate, but you can definitely say go vote. You can definitely tell people to go pray, discern, and vote your principles and your values. And pastors have to be encouraging that if they're actually going to be preaching the gospel according to the Bible and according to the activism we need to push back against Satan on earth.
Amen. Amen. Well said. And, coming into this midterm election, we've already got our work cut out for us, because it's very rare that we actually keep the midterms when we've got a Republican in the presidency. So, I mean, it's like 2 or 3 times in the last umpteen years that the same party that's in power stays in power. And that's a very sobering thought right now. I mean, I think the economy is going to be turning around. I think people are going to start feeling that in their wallets, and I'm hoping that it's going to play well, but God knows what they're going to pull out of the hat, to cheat. I mean, I think the SAVE Act and all these things that are going on are great steps. But, look, they pulled out COVID, and I mean, I can't say that was intentionally released, but I have my suspicions. But
the way we treated it was,
pardon?
The way Democrats treated it, they were forcing people away from churches, but allowing them to go to, whatever bingo parlor they were, operating on the side, that they were getting kickbacks. So, again, I think that it's important to remember also that this is not, as we head into this election year, a matter of right versus left. It's a matter of right versus wrong. It's a matter of right versus evil. When you look at what the Democrats are promoting, again, we had another transgender shooting in Canada, and you look at the numbers of these transgender shootings, whether it was Covenant here in Nashville, whether it was last week, another transgender going off and shooting and killing people. Then we have a Canadian hockey game. The number of murders being committed by these mentally ill transgenders that the Democrat left and their protesters are embracing and promoting and plying with drugs. You're putting dangerous drugs into the bodies and minds of mentally ill people, and then surprised when they go out and murder people far in excess of their tiny percentage of our population. We have to stop allowing the left to embrace putting boys into girls' locker room, boys into girls' sports, the crazy left-wing, bizarre things they're promoting. That is satanic. It is evil. And we've got to realize that this is literally a battle of good versus evil at the ballot box.
It is. It is. And for all those out there that might say, oh, don't push your religion on me. Well, you're pushing yours on me, because it certainly is a religion. This secularism, this woke ideology is 100% a religion. And so either, only one's going to win in America. They can't coexist. Tell me real quick before I let you go about what's happening in Iran, because I know, my heart goes out to the Christians, and we talked about that last week, but there are so many people coming to Christ in Iran, and we want to pray for those people that are facing this imminent war. I know we've got some talks going on this week. What's your opinion about how you think that's going to go down?
I think as long as there's talking going on, there is the possibility of progress. The problem is dealing with the Iranians. There is always talk, and then they're doing things behind the scenes that undercut whatever they're saying in those talks. And I think, again, President Trump is a realist. I think Marco Rubio and those that he's dispatching to communicate with the Iranians are realists and understand who they are dealing with, and that they cannot be trusted. So I hope that the talks are leading to something positive and beneficial. You're not going to get a peace deal if you're not talking. There's no guarantee that you will, or that you'll resolve conflicts if you're talking. But 100% you won't if you're not talking.
Yeah. It does seem like a buying time lip service kind of thing, though, where they're just, and I love seeing all of our warships positioning over there. It's like you say, he's a realist. It's like, we'll talk, but, we're going to go ahead and put our pieces on the chessboard, because we pretty much anticipate what we're going to be dealing with. You can't reason with evil. You can't negotiate with evil, and that is pure evil. the proxies that they prop up all around the country or all around the world, like the Hamas invasion on Israel on October 7th, things like that. You can't negotiate with that evil. The only thing a bully understands on the schoolyard is a force greater than itself. And thank God we have Trump in office, who is quite a force to be reckoned with. I'm hopeful. I think a lot of us are hopeful as we watch this that things wouldn't progress to that point, because we know we've got threats from other countries that would get involved if he does make a strike. But it's sure looking like it's headed that way.
Well, then we have enemies around the world who want to fund and fuel and incentivize terrorist activity on our own shores, in our own communities. And yet again, you have the Democrats who have shut down the government because they oppose a photo ID to go vote, which is the norm all over the world. And yet we've got the World Soccer matches that are going to be coming to the U.S., 11 different sites, and we are diminishing our security. We're diminishing Department of Homeland Security and TSA and everything else, because the Democrats are once again trying to promote a dangerous political agenda at the expense of American security and safety. And I don't want people to be fearful, but at the same time recognize they are playing an exceedingly dangerous game with the lives of our own families and our own communities around this country by diminishing our ability to detect, prevent, and avoid and keep these dangerous terrorists from, putting their plots into action. And again, when and if something happens, people need to remember why it happened and who is to blame, because they are the ones on the left who are diminishing our security when we need it most.
Amen. Amen. I couldn't agree more. God's on the throne. None of this is a surprise to him. So yeah, as you say, it's not something for us to be fearful of, mindful of, and on that battlefield, using our mouth, using our words, pushing it back. But yeah, we don't need to fear. I think he's coming any minute personally. So bring it is what I say. I hope you're right with Jesus out there, because he's coming soon. I really believe that. Steve, thank you so much. As always, great job. Ladies, please go to tristardaily.com. We can trust Steve Gill with our news. And Steve, thanks so much once again for coming on. We will see you back next week.
See you next week. Thank you.
Thank you. All right, ladies, for tea time today, I've got a very special guest. Now, I want to ask you this first. What does the Earth's crust and the modern patriarchy have in common? Not much. I promise we're going to draw this connection. Today, we're going to be talking to Professor Marc Defant. He is a world-renowned geologist and geochemist. He has spent his career unearthing the hard truths. We're going to be doing a lot of that today. He has hunted diamonds for De Beers. He has lectured at MIT. He's been funded by National Geographic in his work and even debated on the Joe Rogan Experience. He's a world-renowned expert on volcanoes. He's not afraid of the heat. We like that here. He's turned his scientific lens now more toward a new frontier, cracks in the contemporary feminism and social myths. And this is what I am very interested in talking with him about today. We're going to dig into the science, society, the data, the stuff that people are really usually very reluctant and let's just say scared to talk about these days. We're not here. We're going to welcome Professor Marc Defant to the show. Welcome, Marc. How are you?
Thank you, Diane. I'm wonderful. Thanks for having me.
Thanks for being here. This discussion is probably a first for the Lady Up podcast, but I was so fascinated by your work. I had to bring you on because in the modern narrative now, when we're looking at the feminist movement specifically, you've really dug deep on this. And I hope that you're going to be able to give us intellectual ammunition, if you will, for the things that we as Christian women already believe at the soul level. So I find it really interesting that you've been published in Nature magazine, and now we're challenging the constructs and the narratives around human nature as a culture. So do you find that navigating the world of, let's say, academic geology is probably safer than the minefields of the political narratives?
I think it's a lot safer.
I'm sure it is.
I had no idea.
One of the things we keep hearing a lot about is objective truth versus subjective truth. And obviously, most people know what that is, but just for maybe the listeners who don't know, I kind of looked this up, and and tell me if I'm right on this, but I understand objective truth to be the truth that is independent of how we feel about it, our emotions, opinions, things like that. And then the subjective truth is basically the polar opposite of that. It's solely based on what we feel, our emotions, our opinions about things. Would that be accurate?
I think that's fair. Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. So let's dive into that, because as we're hear people say things like, well, my truth, your truth. If there's not one truth, then let's walk down that lane first, if we can. And why is this becoming such a part of our narrative these days? What is going on with this subjective versus objective truth in your findings?
Oh, I liked how you did that, Diane. I tell you what, I spent a lot of time dealing with objective truth, and as far as I can tell, at least in terms of being on Earth right now, objective truth is what we can prove about the Earth. And I don't mean geologically speaking, I mean anything. So, for example, we might want to prove that there's gravity, or that does it change throughout the planet. And so we've come up with equations that define gravity every place on the Earth. So that seems to be an objective truth about the physical world. Now, where things get crazy is when you start bringing in things like opinions and deciding that that's the truth. It may be the truth. It's hard to pin down when you're not using an empirical study to document that. So it's a good place to start anytime you're talking about, science-related things. And I'm usually always talking about science-related things because I'm a scientist.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, we hear follow the science, right? Of course, when COVID was breaking out, a lot of these things were going on. Everybody's follow the science, follow the science. You've written a lot about the misuse of science.
Yeah.
And a lot of us, a lot of the ladies in my audience too, we see how science was manipulated, and science was just a lot of times distorted, to push a traditional worldview or a narrative. So I don't want to take you too far down that rabbit trail, but as a geologist, you deal with things that are set in stone. You deal with objective truths all of your career.
I try to.
Yeah. So what do you think why is it so dangerous for a society to start playing with that? Why is it dangerous in what you've researched and all of the ways that you have, all the angles you've looked at this through? What is the danger for us blurring that?
Well, the danger I see is that if we stop denying science, and I think it's being done quite a bit lately, if we stop denying science, and when I say science, I mean this empirically based study of the Earth, not something unrelated. Again, the Earth being the physical world, the universe, whatever. If we deny that, then we're going to have trouble when we come across something that's really important that is science-based, and we're trying to get across that message. So I'm always concerned about people undermining science, and I'm even worried about scientists undermining science. We have to be fair, we have to be empirical, and we can't take sides. We've got to be, I say disinterested. I guess that's a good term, but not emotionally involved in the answers. And I hope that's the way I've been.
Yeah. From everything I've learned about you, I would say that's true. What would be a motivation for a scientist, someone who's so grounded in these objective truths, to kind of start going along with these subjective truths?
Well, I think it's possible, for example, for a scientist to go into the laboratory and work all day and be very scientific and rational, but leave and then have faith in, religion. I think you can make that dichotomy. So I'm not saying that subjective truth is wrong. In cases like that, we may not have proof for that. I mean, that's why we call it faith, because we don't have objective truths defining it. So I don't want to confuse the two here. I'm speaking just about objective truth. And when I see people trying to, they're trying to undermine scientific truth with their subjective beliefs. And what I find that kind of heinous, actually. For example, I started getting into all of this with feminist studies not because I was against feminist studies, but because they're undermining science. They're saying, look, we don't believe this, not because it's wrong, but because they don't happen to agree with it, or their ideology denies any belief in some of the parts of what I've been arguing for, which is evolutionary psychology.
It's almost like it's a complete contradiction. Some of these narratives, some of these ideologies.
It is very much so. Very much so. Yes.
Yeah. So faith and science complement one another, whereas it seems to me in a lot of these dangerous ideologies that are going on, it's a complete contradiction, and it just doesn't gel.
And I'm not sure they complement each other. Actually, I think that in some respects they're polar opposites, faith and science. And I'm not denigrating either one. I'm just saying that if you try to use the physical world to support your belief in something like religion, for example, it's going to be very difficult, if not impossible. Yeah. And I think that's kind of what feminists have been doing. They've been kind of saying, well, we don't believe that, so let's make up this stuff about social construction, and voila, we have a story that we can put out there. I don't think that's fair to students at all. And yet these are the very people that claim that they are all for science. So they never tell you the caveat that we're all for science unless it disagrees with us. That's not how it works.
What got you interested in shifting gears like this, studying the human nature side of it, or the more, well, like you just said, the evolutionary psychology? What got you interested in that, and kind of considering the geochemic work that you did before, what got you kind of pulled in this direction?
Well, I haven't shifted gears completely. I still have my hands in geochemistry. I'm working with we think there was a comet airburst 13,500 years ago, which may have changed the climate and even killed off the large megafauna. Well, that's a whole different story. So I do keep my fingers in geochemistry. But in the 1990s, I read a wonderful book called The Moral Animal by Robert Wright, and it was about evolutionary psychology. And wow, it changed the way I view the world in many respects. And I was teaching a science honors course at the time, and all through the 90s, then I started interjecting all this information on evolutionary psychology that I was reading about, and got so interested in it that I eventually tried to get my hands on everything I could. And I felt like I was at a knowledge level where I could start writing papers for some journals. And that's what I've been doing for the last few years. One of them being this article on feminist studies and how, they're misusing or denying science, really, which is very frustrating from my standpoint.
Yes, I'm sure it is. When we start to see all of the ramifications of that, the boys and girls sports, that's very top of mind. Riley Gaines is a friend of mine. She's been very active on the front lines about advocating against that. And it seems to be common sense. Like I heard somebody say recently, what seems to be common sense isn't so common anymore.
That's
but
wonderful,
it's fascinating to me how this has gotten such a stronghold in our society. Like, why do you think people are more susceptible to going along with this, going along with these complete denials of the biology and those objective truths? Is there some shift that you've noticed or some trend that you've noticed that could maybe explain that?
Well, there's a woman out there named Helen Andrews, and she's written a wonderful article which just came out a couple of months ago on it's called The Great Feminization. And she seems to think that the rise of what we call wokeism is related to the fact that women are beginning to take over many of the things that were typically run by males. So, for example, in government or in the court system, more women now are judges, more women are lawyers. In the universities now, more women are professors, and she looks at along with a woman, Corey Clark, and Corey Clark went out and got all kinds of polls she did with women and how they viewed things versus men, and it appears that women look for safe zones. I'm not talking about all women now, but some women, and they prefer safe zones, for example, over freedom of speech. So they would rather have silence someone that threatens them than to have freedom of speech. Or in the court systems, we've had some crazy things taking place in immigration where judges will help immigrants escape. So they're against laws that might make individuals like immigrants not safe. And so if you believe her, and I'm beginning to tend that way, and I'm trying to support it with some data. That's where my research is going right now. And if you believe that, then you can say that wokeism and all of this is maybe due to the rise of women. I don't want to insult the women out there because my wife, for example, she doesn't agree with a lot of this stuff that is woke. But it does explain why we had such a sharp shift in it over the last 10 years or so. Yeah, I agree with you. I think some of the stuff is just crazy. Getting back to what you said about women in male sports, I keep wondering where are all the feminists that are supposed to be protecting women? Why aren't they speaking out? And I think that's due to the fact that there's a large group of women, the feminists, which seem to want to treat men and women equally in society. And that's a good idea, but I don't think anybody would think we're equal. I mean, there are physical differences between us, and my biggest contention is there are mental and emotional differences between us.
Yes.
And I think that thinking that we're the same denies reality.
Yeah. Yeah, I completely agree, which is a great segue into kind of this next little segment that I wanted to go into. Many women feel like the feminist movement and modern culture really devalues the unique roles that men and women hold. I mean, I understand maybe the origin of trying to level the playing field a bit in some areas, but it's such a slippery slope now. And it seems like it's almost degrading I believe the unique qualities that God designed men and women with that should be celebrated are now degraded in places by modern feminism. They claim that the traditional family structure is an invention. For somebody like you who studies evolutionary psychology, what does the evidence say about the natural design of mothers, fathers, the nurturers? Do you think that in your research, did you find that the traditional family in any way is oppressive to women?
Oh man, you just got me rolling my eyes now. I think I'm on the university campus and I hear this kind of stuff all the time, and I have to bite my tongue sometimes.
Sure.
You made a good point. Yes, they do think the family is constructed. That's the whole idea of social constructionism. Like, for example, the patriarchy in its dominance and its subjugation of women. They claim means that, we have forced women to stay home and have babies while we,
Right.
run the world. As it turns out, if you start looking at the data, and this probably won't be a surprise to you, women want to have families. They want to raise children, and a lot of men do too, like me.
Mhm.
So
Mhm.
to say that the family is a construct just drives me crazy. And let's talk about social construction for a minute, because it's a really good place to start. Um, Social construction has been constructed by feminists because they didn't like the old idea of how men and women differ, and some of society's what they would call the patriarchal system. And to just describe social construction in general, they believe that we are born with blank slates, that we have no predispositions towards anything. And
Hmm.
so when we come into the world, then it's all culture, it's all society, and we become men because of society, we become women because of society. Nobody ever explains, of course, why we're a man sexually but we're not a man gender wise, or
Yeah.
the same with women. So and you know it should be obvious that we're born into the world with certain characteristics. For example, linguists have been saying for decades and decades that that language is inherent in us. We come out with our brains constructed so that we can understand languages. And if you look at languages worldwide, I'm not a linguist, but this is what linguists tell me, is that there are structures in language that are the same everywhere, cross-culturally. So culture couldn't be we can't say that culture is the same, is the only constructor of language. And the same with gender, and of course with sex. There are some people that say that sex is socially constructed, which really just blows my mind. I don't know
Yeah.
where they get these ideas. Anyway,
I
somebody
know.
decides it, and this is what we were getting back to about subjectivity. Now, when I read the feminist journals, I'm amazed at how somebody comes up with an idea and then everybody says, no, we don't like that idea. Or everybody says, oh, let's get behind that idea. And then that becomes sort of the major idea of the day,
Yeah.
paradigm, if you will. And then that seems to get, taught in all the classrooms around the country. That's not the way it should be, the way I think of it. For example, in the social sciences, you can have facts in your system. Historians do it all the time. We go back and we say, okay, did George Washington do this or didn't he do this? And we try to find evidence for that or against it. So historians operate on a scientific basis also, and so do psychologists, at least a lot of psychologists. And I think
Mhm.
that some of them are social constructionists, but a lot of psychologists try to do that too. I don't know. Is
Yeah.
that making any sense?
It does.
I
It
want to
does.
kind
And
of
I
direct this the way you want me to.
no, I like where you went with that. And one thing I'd like to revisit for a minute is when you explain how they believe that when you come into the world, you're a blank slate, and that everything is basically your fate is constructed by whoever raises you. And I mean, if we just look at that for a minute, because I know a lot of women wonder, like, again, why are people going along with this? Why is this contagion spreading like this in people's minds and hearts? And again, I go back to, without a creator, if we don't have the understanding that we are created beings, we come with instincts, we come with purpose, we come with a DNA that very, very specific to each person. My husband's a biologist. If we just look at the cellular level, it's impossible to I think it's just an impossible argument to really substantiate, is how I see it. If you put someone on a deserted island when they were born, there's certain things I would think. I mean, you're the scientist, so correct me if I'm wrong, but if you had a boy and a girl born on the same island, eventually, look at Blue Lagoon. Do you remember the movie?
I do.
Eventually, they're going to do girl things and boy things. And I don't know. It's just, to me, it's so ridiculous. I understand. Like I heard one time a feminist making an argument to me about the idea of pink for girls versus blue for boys, or boys playing with dump trucks versus girls playing with Barbies. And how this from the time that they're born, their pink nurseries or their blue nurseries is starting them on this path to their gender. And I always wonder, okay, if gender is a social construct, right? If that's really true, then how can changing your, like if you're born in the wrong body or if you're kind of conformed to some specific social construct, then how is changing your sex going to support or negate that?
Yeah. In fact, I've used the argument that back in the 60s, we tried to convert gay men to straight men, and we didn't have much luck at it. And so I think a lot of people began to think this must be something hardwired. It doesn't mean necessarily that it is, genetic. But even that is, we have some evidence that it is genetic. So, and if you talk to gay people, I know a lot of gay people that say, "Oh, I was born that way," and so I think the summing all this up, this is an argument against social constructionism, and I think the same thing about a woman that wants to be a man or a man that wants to be a woman. I suspect that has something to do with hormones during their development rather than something that society created. Somebody's got to explain to me how a trans person can be a trans person when they're raised in a perfectly normal family, which a lot of trans people are, and then they later become trans. So it does go against the grain if you start thinking about it, and that's how important this ideology is to these people. They're unwilling to. I had a huge debate with a feminist about what I said in this article because she disagreed with it, and I'm lucky because I have. It's pretty easy for me to debate them because I've got science behind me and they don't. So the only thing they can do is say, "Oh, well, that's wrong. We don't believe that," or they can't bring up data to support their ideas, and that's also frustrating when you're debating them because all they do is deny.
Yeah. It's very, their footing really gets challenged a lot when we start to go down some of these roads. So kind of just to wrap my last question up for you on that subject, just before we move on, do you feel like it's going to be successful, or do you feel like you see in your research it trending back toward the normal? Like, in other words, do you think this is going to get worse, or do you think this is going to get better as papers like yours continue to come out?
Well, everybody, the left has done a very good job of silencing people. And it's just now where there's been a little let up over the last 5 or 6 years where we're starting to see people feel like they can come out. I stayed silent on this for quite a long time because my job was on the line, and they made it very clear that it was. So I started writing about this about 3 years ago, and I'll continue to do so. It's certainly an environment is changing where I feel like I won't be canceled if I write on this, or at least the pressure to cancel me will be less. And I have some support from the administration also on this. Mm-hmm. So did I wrap that up for you, or is there more?
No, that's great. It's great. It gives us hope.
Yeah, it does.
That this is starting to wear off, like that the true science, objective truth, these things are starting to win out over this narrative that they've been pushing on us for so long.
If you can beat the Catholic Church, excuse me for interrupting. I'm sorry.
No, go ahead.
Well, let's not forget science overcame the Catholic Church. I'm not saying anything bad about Catholics. I'm just saying that, that dogma in the Catholic Church was very powerful. And I think if you can win out in that world, you can win out in any world. And so I think eventually science is going to win out. I may not be alive when it does because it may take a long time, but I think eventually it will.
Yeah, eventually truth does win out. It might, like you say, it might take a minute, but it does. So I'd like to shift now toward the pay gap, the subject of the pay gap. Your data suggested that the pay gap is largely driven by different choices that men and women make. It's not driven by, the things that a lot of feminists say that it is. So what kinds of choices have you found the differences between men and women? What kind of choices do you think are driving the pay gap?
Well, let me just change one thing about what you said, and that is it's not my data. I did some pretty significant research in the economic literature and found that there were an immense number of women economists working on this very subject. And they set out to find out why there was a pay gap and what was generating that pay gap. So first of all, there is a pay gap. But the question is that due to what the feminists say, which is this patriarchy where men get together, I guess, in weekly meetings and decide that we're going to subjugate and we're going to hold back women? Or is it really due to other things? And of course, my answer, or I should say the data that I found from these economists, one of them being Claudia Golden, who won a Nobel Prize for her work in this area, she would say that it's due to women's choice. Women are adverse about high risk. So women tend to steer away from jobs that require 80-hour weeks, where the stress is immense to get a lot of work done for the corporation, so to speak. And men tend to gravitate towards those fields. They tend to be more competitive. They tend to be more, in your face kind of thing. And the other side of it is that women tend to want to take care of children. Of course, they're maternal. And so they'll take time out of their careers to raise children. And that turns out to be pretty hard on a career if you want to keep your pay up at the level of the men you're not necessarily men, but men and other women that decide not to have children are doing. So when women are not raising children and they decide they want to focus on their careers, they tend to get equal pay. They tend to get everything. They tend to get treated equally. So ultimately, and this is why I think the patriarchy that we have, I think there is a patriarchy. I think that men do dominate society, or at least have. I don't know what's going to happen in the future. But I think that's due to the evolutionary psychology aspect of all this. And that is that in hunter-gatherer society, believe it or not, women chose men the way they are now. We haven't had enough time since we were in hunter-gatherer society starting 300,000 years ago to evolve to any differences in civilization. In other words, the 10,000 years or so that we've had civilization isn't enough to have any genetic changes in us. So we're pretty much behaving as we did in caveman days, so to speak. Caveman days, it was in hunter-gatherer society. And so women chose and wanted men that were good at obtaining resources. That doesn't probably surprise anybody. And so that meant good hunters, good family protectors, and good in bringing home the bacon, so to speak. Good resources. What do men want? Men tend to focus on beauty, which is a substitute for health and youth. So we're not that shallow in that sense. I think a lot of feminists try to make it look like we're very shallow in our seeking beauty, but it turns out that we're simply seeking youth and health, and all kinds of studies support that. People. And by the way, when I say beauty, it turns out that beauty to people is average looking. When they had those images where they can superimpose images and come up with a average face of hundreds of people in the society, perhaps you've seen them before. They find that men and women are attracted to the middle range on those. And that makes sense from an evolutionary standpoint. People are looking for, probably as you get to the outer ends of the bell curve on those things, you probably tend to get people that are unhealthy. If you get somebody that's more in the middle, you have a standard chance of. Now, supermodels are out there. They're a whole different story, but because they're ultimately they are, in their 20s looking like 15 and 16-year-old women. They have all the youthful features, great skin, high cheekbones, so on and so forth. So ultimately, then men are going to, and youth plays a big role in this too, because in hunter-gatherer society, women are mostly pregnant or they're lactating. So they they don't have much of a chance to be any way else. And if you're going to have a lot of children as a man, you want to choose someone that's going to be able to have a lot of babies over the course of their lifetime. And it turns out that marrying someone young is a good idea if that's your objective. And that was the objective in hunter-gatherer society. At least that was nature's objective. And we don't necessarily know that we're being driven by a lot of these cases. I never knew why I was attracted to nice-looking women until I started reading about evolutionary psychology. But a lot of lights went off. I just, I thought, why am I doing this? I don't know. Does anybody else have that thought? But anyway, I guess what we're seeing now, though, in that choice by women is that we have this patriarchy. Women tend not to go into leadership roles because they want to stay home and raise children, or at least they certainly did so in hunter-gatherer society. And we've just inherited all those traits. And I think it's important to understand that we still have those, caveman day kinds of drives in us, so that if nothing else, we can not follow them. I don't have to marry a beautiful woman. I don't have to, a woman doesn't have to find a man that's going to bring home the bacon. She may want him to raise children. And it turns out that many men are raising children. Last I saw it was about 10% staying home and raising children while the woman worked.
Yeah, there is a lot of that going on. I've noticed, or at least they're sharing in it. They're kind of ping-ponging, taking turns on their careers, so that they don't have to miss so much time away. And you're right. I mean, there was at one point in my career, I had a consulting firm, and I would give workshops, and I also had a staffing arm. And I really learned a lot of things just experientially doing that, about the differences in men and women. And
I can imagine.
I used to have a workshop that I would give called Take Your Seat at the Men's Table. It was obviously geared for women. And I would have men come in, and they would be my panel for the day. I would kind of give them each an avatar, and they were to be at the boardroom table and have a certain attitude. Like maybe one of them was the type A driven, just the facts, ma'am kind of guy. And then the next guy maybe was raised with 5 sisters. And so he had, an affection toward women, and, so all these different avatars. I had about 5 or 6 men that would come in and do this. And the women would have an opportunity before we sat down to actually do the mock-up, where they could talk to them first. And the men were very candid and very open with them about what their observations were of women in the boardroom. And we studied a lot of this pay gap and all of that. And one of the things that they would say often is that because we are wired so differently, and again, not every woman, not generalizing, but most women, again, I believe God created us with these unique characteristics, that men are very, very logical thinkers. Women are very emotional thinkers. And so when they come to the table and they're trying to agree on a major decision for the company or whatever the organization is, women come at it from an emotional standpoint and men come at it from a logical, and it's oil and water a lot of times. And they don't know how to talk to each other. And so what I found basically, Mark, is that a lot of the men just found women to be a big pain in the butt in the boardroom, and they just rather them not be in there with them, because it was just, the board meetings would go on much longer than they needed to. The woman felt like if her idea was rejected, then she was rejected. And that's the other thing about that you said about the caveman kind of hunter-gatherer days that I found really interesting too in some research was that, and I say my research is not like your research, I'm sure, but just, just learning about the experiential side. We as women were so much more community minded. We rely on each other, and we really want consensus. And it's very difficult, I have found, even in organizations where I've been on boards and things, it's very difficult for a woman to assert herself or assert her solution or opinion in a boardroom with mixed genders, because she does feel intimidated, or she feels like she'll be ostracized somehow. And back in those days, that was very dangerous to be ostracized from your community.
It is now too.
Yeah, it is. So it's just interesting how men and women are driven so differently. But I think you're absolutely spot on about why there are so many reasons for the pay gap. It's not just related to the way you were born as far as your sex goes.
And I should probably emphasize that this doesn't mean there's not discrimination that's taken place in the past or now.
Yeah.
Clearly there was.
Yeah.
And is.
Yeah, I agree with that. And as women started entering the workforce, I think it was 1988, I was on a board for the National Association of Women Business Owners. And I learned then that it was Reagan who signed into law that women could even own businesses in 1988. That wasn't a law until then.
Oh, I didn't realize that. That's interesting.
Yeah. Women had to have a male co-signer if they were going to be a business owner. So really women on the scene in the business world is still pretty new. I mean, you had your outliers, you had the Chanels of the world, and you had the Mary Kays, and you had some people, entrepreneurs, but it's pretty rare. It was pretty rare. So I think we're still catching up. So the natural nuclear family, God's design for family, is not victimizing women. It's at the end of the day. I think we can just say that.
That's pretty safe to say, yes.
Yeah. I'd like to shift to education. Obviously, you're a professor in Florida, protecting education, the next generation. So a lot of the women that are listening are mothers, grandmothers, and they're really worried about what their children are learning at university right now. And so as a professor, I just would love to hear from you the red flags that parents should look for in curriculum. Like, what are some things they can sort of be on alert for to know if the ideology is being prioritized over the curriculum?
I'm so glad you asked me that. I can tell you what I did with my children. And I wanted my children to go to college. It may not be a good idea, though, to send all children to college. That may not be a good goal for all people. So you might want to even think about that. I see these people going out and getting degrees in, African American studies. Nothing wrong with African American studies, so to speak, but can you get a job in that out there?
Right.
It's so hard to get a job in some of these fields. And so that puts these kids into, hundreds of thousands of dollars that they owe the government. And they've got this degree that may be financially worthless to them. I'm not saying it's worthless. I'm just saying it might be financially worthless.
Yeah.
And, so that's another reason to stay away from college. Ultimately, what I told my kids is try to stay away from social sciences if you can. Humanities. I know that's a terrible thing to say, but it's so. I can't tell you how it's so leftist centered and so political and so. I just don't think you can get a good education. You're going to be indoctrinated. It's. The ones that, and this is what I tried to say in my paper, is that I don't think we should have feminist studies on university campuses, not because it's not something that's good to know, it is, but we shouldn't be having subject matter that isn't about the truth on college campuses. People are paying us to teach them about something called the truth, or as close as we can get to it. And when they come on campus, and they're indoctrinated politically, that doesn't seem to be fair to young people and the parents that are paying for a lot of this. So I would say be careful in those realms. African American studies, those are very, very politically oriented. Gay studies are out there too, and I warned my children to try to avoid those. Sometimes you can't. Sometimes they require you to take certain courses, but they were pretty good about that because they were in the sciences, so they got around it.
Question for you on that real quick before we go on to my next question. Why do you think there's such an unbalanced bias there? Why do you think that so many of the people in the social sciences are left of center or are really pushing a lot of these subjective truths? Like where are all the professors that are teaching that could be trusted to teach social sciences?
Well, really a subject for another day. I mean, all we could spend hours on that. But from my personal perspective, and I don't have much in the way of background in this area, but it seems to me that there's this undercurrent ideology of Marxism flowing through
Yeah.
the social sciences, humanities, arts, and that all comes from mostly anyway from a group out of Frankfurt called the Frankfurt School, and they were in Nazi Germany, and ironically, American professors said, "Oh, we've got to get them out of Nazi Germany because the Nazis hated Marxists, along with a lot of other folks." So they brought them over here, and then our universities were inculcated with all of these young Marxists who then influenced. And we can see, if you've Habermas and Marcuse and these people were very powerful in the 60s particularly, and their students went out and populated the university systems, and so the left has taken over the universities. I think they're like 5 or 10% Republicans. Not that they're always correlated that way, but there aren't many conservatives in university campuses. Even among scientists, they're not. And I suspect it's because there's been a movement. I had some people that were social scientists, philosophers, historians, who told me that they sought people that perceived the world they did politically, and they hired them on that basis. And I said, "Well, how do you find that stuff out?" And they said, "We ask them." So I guess they're. I thought that was off limits when someone was interviewing to ask them about their political beliefs and stuff, but apparently not in the social sciences.
Yeah,
So
and especially if you're not a dissenting opinion.
Yes.
Yeah. I completely agree. I've had this discussion very often with some good friends of mine, and one of my friends is Dr. Carol Swain, who was she was in the university system for many years, and she's a Black professor who got early tenure at Princeton, and she came up from poverty and literally rose to fame. But we talk about this a lot, and her being, a Black American woman who entered academia with literally, she hadn't even finished high school. She got her GED and then went on and became, I think she ended up with 5 degrees, but was taught law at Vanderbilt. So she was really coming up during the 60s and 70s when affirmative action was really coming into play. And she concurs completely that it was a Marxist agenda that really got rooted in our universities in the 60s and 70s. And they've been on mission since then to indoctrinate our kids. And it is a very, very real, it's not a conspiracy theory. It's a very real, tangible thing. So just one more question on that then, as we kind of wrap up here. You've given them some great red flags and some great things to avoid, and I appreciate that. How can if they start to see those red flags and they're talking with their children or their grandchildren about it, like 2 questions, like one, how do they discern between somebody trying to push the ideological narrative on them versus, being taught real truth? So I know we've talked about some of that already today, but if they start to notice it, then what can they do to speak up as a student? Like, how do they counter that? How do they protect their education from kind of going off those ideological, ramps? How do they protect their education to make sure they're getting a good one?
Well, I think you have to do it before you get in the class, because I don't think there's anything you can do about it in the classroom, unless, of course, the professor is doing some wrong things. But
it's kind of too late then once they're in it.
Yeah. There's one student who got in a class where the professor was saying anti-Semitic things, and she spoke up about it. And I think the professor even got, I don't know if he got canned or not, but he may have gotten put on leave. But the important point is, it's awful hard to do when you're already in the class. I think the way we can win this is to get parents to be thinking about who they want teaching their children. And that goes all the way back into grade school and high school, because these people are coming out of colleges and they're populating our students' grade school. I saw it with my kids when they were in high school. They were coming back reading, all these, multiple ways of knowing ideas. It's sort of like, it's preposterous, and you can see where there are key words that come up, like multiple ways of knowing, that sort of stuff. If you start hearing things like that, those are flags. And then students can also ask other students. It's amazing. Older students can direct people to what they want, I think.
For the women that are listening today that want to raise their families, lead their communities with a commitment to both faith and facts. We want a combination of the two. What's one final piece of encouragement maybe you could give to them about standing up for that objective truth, as things get more and more confusing?
Well, I think it would be a good idea if you hear about teachers, that are abusing the system by, teaching their ideology or trying to indoctrinate children or older students, that parents should speak up. There are organizations right now out there that are trying to fight this, and it's having an impact. I don't know if it's impacting the colleges very much, but it's certainly impacting high school and grade schools. So I would really encourage that. Well, Diane, I really appreciate you having me. It's been great. Really enjoyed your questions.
I really enjoyed it too so much. What a great conversation with Professor Marc Defant today. Ladies, I encourage you to go to marcdefant.com and read his paper, the evolutionary psychology paper that he just recently did. And I'm going to have a link here in the show notes for you. Please go and spend some time reading that, learning about Marc's work. Really also encourage you to get his book, Voyage of Discovery, explores the Big Bang and to the Ice Age theory. It's an exploration of incredible complexity, the fine tuning of our universe that often can lead to good discussions about a creator. It's rare to find somebody who can talk about the deep history of such objective truth and also be able to address the cultural challenges that we have today. I hope that it's been a real blessing for you. I hope that you've taken away some good things today. He reminds us that we don't have to choose between being pro-science or pro-values. When we look at the data and we look at the design of the world around us, they often do tell the same story. So don't be intimidated by learning about this. I know maybe some of you may feel like, oh, this is over my head, or this is, too complex, but it's really not. We're all kind of rowing in the same direction. We all want the same thing. We want a healthy society. We want a healthy thinkers out there. We want critical thinkers. And this is all part of us doing our part to make sure we can back up the values that we express on a regular basis. So dive deeper into Marc's work, marcdefant.com, and make sure you check out his book, Voyage of Discovery. And again, I've linked all those resources for you in the show notes. All right. Well, as we wrap up today, I just want to remind you, let's cling to the rock. That is Jesus Christ. He is the cornerstone of our foundational faith. And that is what we need to be running to when everything else seems to be shifting and changing. He never changes. He is solid. He is stable. He is the same yesterday, today, and tomorrow, and we can run to him. So don't be scared. All this stuff that's going on in the world and even in our country, even in your neighborhood, you don't have to worry. When you start to feel the ground shifting, all you got to do is cling to the rock. All you got to do is run back to that Bible, run back to prayer, run back to praise music. The joy of the Lord is our strength. And the way that we really increase our joy is by doing the things that God told us to do, praising him. I can't tell you, I love to do this in my car. I love to put on my praise music and just sing to the top of my lungs. And I'm riding down the road with my hands up, and I don't care the passersby that see me. I don't care, y'all. We got to be willing to take a stand. Maybe somebody driving by might get a kick out of that, but they might go, maybe it makes a statement that we'll never know. It's okay. I always say that it's our job to plant the seeds. The outcome, the harvest is none of our business. But if you're going around your house praising the Lord, your children are seeing it. Maybe some of your family members are laughing at you. It's okay. It's okay. Don't be weird. But I'm just saying, if your heart's really in it and you're just praising him, I do it all the time. That's where we can really build up our joy. That's the joy of the Lord is our strength. And we need strength in these really trying times that we're in. And when people tell you, you need to turn that Jesus down, if you could just tone down that Jesus, crank it up. People need to know where you stand. They need to know who you stand for. That needs to be evident in your life. And again, don't get weird. And when I say weird, here's what I mean. Like, I knew some friends years back that went all in for Jesus, and God loved them. They were all in. I mean, they were amazing. And sometimes I questioned, I'm like, maybe I should be more all in like they are. But on the other side of it now, I see that it was a little too far. You don't want to disconnect from the world. We're here to engage in the world. We want to attract the world to that stability and that joy that we have in the Lord, right? We don't want to be repelling them because they just think that we're, like I said, weird. So what I mean by that is you don't want to like go live on, on a hilltop somewhere where you're not engaging and you're just like living, a disconnected life. No, we're to be joy and strength, salt and light among society. We don't mingle with it in the old ways that we used to, but we are a light in this dark world. And so we need to be about, going into the normal places in society and all that, but we're bringing that light in, and always be spirit led, of course, wherever you go. Let the Holy Spirit, if you hear that little voice saying, I want you to go in here, just obey him and go. Or if you hear that voice that says, stay out of there, then be obedient to that. He'll tell us where he needs that salt shaker. Okay. But I'm just saying, build up your joy. Don't be afraid, and cling to the rock, cling to Jesus in these unsettling times. And as I say, I believe he's coming back any minute. The most important thing we can do right now is to take that firm stand for him, attract more people to him, try and win more hearts to him by our testimony and the fact that we're not hypocrites, the fact that we really believe what we're saying, that we're all in for the Lord. That's going to win more people, because when he comes back, we want to take as many with us as we possibly can when we go. Don't we? Yeah, we do. All right, ladies. Hope you have an awesome rest of your day. I will see you back next week. Lady up.
Taking back this house, taking back this town. Mama, don't back down. Just a lady up.